Okay, so now we have discussed how to create variables, how to sequence statements together to create a series of line of logic. We've refactored that and actually created our own methods. A method named average, that average numbers, we've called that, we've used it in different ways. But I want to go into a little more in depth in the shorter video into what we're looking at as far as identifiers, what we're looking at as far as parameters and arguments, and to further understand what's actually happening. And we're going to do that by debugging, okay, in Visual Studio. So a program is a series of statements. It's a series of sequencing of statements that happen in an order. And as you've seen so far, it doesn't necessarily read left to right like you do when you're reading an English language or natural. It's hopping around in different places, doing different things. Like if I refactored this and passed that in, when it hits this statement, when the compiler hits this statement, it's going to go into average, but then it's going to go inside of average and execute that, and then return that value back, and then call writeLine and go into that method. So a statement is not as simple as reading left to right. There are some things that are in that statement where if you're looking at it, it's kind of hopping around back and forth. So we're going to do something called debug. Now, debugging is something you do quite a bit as a developer, and it's good to go ahead and learn the skill set early on about how to debug. So we're going to do something very simple. You're going to hover your mouse over here to the left and click in this kind of gray space over here on the left, and it will create this little red dot. That little red dot says when this application starts executing, and when the execution gets to this dot, stop the program, and it gives you a chance to look at values in the program. Okay, so it's nothing crazy. Just set your dot here, set your red dot here. Now this is the part of an integrated development environment that I was talking about. An integrated environment allows you to debug, to stop execution, to not just run the program, but to stop the program midstream and look at some things in the program. So I'm going to run it. It executes. Oh, it stopped. Now look at this. We have stopped execution here. And if you look down here, this is a window called locals. And what that says is we've got the value num1, num2, num3. And these are the values. And these are their data types. And we can actually what's called step through the code and see what's happening. So you can either use some tools up here at the top, which is step into, which is to go into a function, step into a method. If a method calls another method, you can step into the method. You can step over, which just executes line by line without going into methods. Or you can step out, which exits the method that you're currently in. Or if you see, you can do F11, F10, or Shift F11. So we're actually going to do F10. So if I hit F10, it steps through the next statement. You'll see this little arrow lets us know where we're at executing. So right now it says if you hover over a value, it says average, or you look down here, or you hover, it says average is 0. Num is 10, num2 is 20, or num2 is 20, num1 plus num2, or sorry, num2 is 20, num3 is 30, and that's divided by 3. And if you hover over the statement, it tells you that's going to evaluate to 20. So I stopped the execution. If you look in the window, nothing's displaying up here. Execution is halted. while I debug. I'm going to hit F10 again. Now you'll see that average has the value of 20. You'll see it's in red down here. That value changed. I'm going to hit F10 again. That's going to go to the bottom brace. And it's going to take us back up here to console.writeLine. And we're back in a different method. And you'll see that average has been called, and that value 20 has been returned inside of these braces. So you should, instead of seeing average now, you should just see the value 20. So average with the parameters 10, 20, and 30 represents the value 20. And that value 20 will then get passed into console.writeLine, and it will execute. I hit F10 again. You'll see now 20 is written to the screen, and it executed. I hit F10 again. We'll exit the program. So by debugging, by setting this what's called a breakpoint, where we want the program to stop, we can stop and step through and see what's happening within our method, the sequence of statements. But that should let you know something here. So all this method is expecting is an integer, num. And if you'll see, it's called nesting. The innermost expression is evaluated first. So we work from the inside out. So if average is called inside of writeLine, then inside of average, these things are evaluated. Now let's say instead of 10, we do 5 plus 5. And so that looks very different. Now let's quickly create another method that just returns a value. Let's say value. No parameters. It returns a 20. And we can call that inside of here. I know this looks kind of convoluted and difficult. So, but it's nothing new to you. It's just a different way of looking at it. Now, as complicated as this looks, you actually have an understanding of what's actually happening here. Let's set a breakpoint here. When main gets called, writeLine will get called, and anything inside of its argument, any of its arguments will be evaluated. Well, it has an argument of average. So argument has some parameters, so its innermost values are evaluated. So 5 plus 5, value 30. Those are evaluated. Well, inside of that, there is another method called value, and it's evaluated. And if it had any parameters, on and on and on and on and on, it would keep evaluating until it got to the innermost expression, and it would evaluate and unpeel itself like an onion. So let's use our debugging, and let's see what's happening here. So let's start. We've dropped into value. We've returned 30. We've dropped into average. We're going to work our way through average. We've returned that. And then we'll return that, which is 20, and it writes to the screen. So if you'll see here, if you look at what just happened, we understand, as we discussed with variables, that it just expects a container. It's a container that expects a value. How you get that value inside of that container can be in a lot of different ways. It can be through a method, it can be through an expression. So all it's expecting is an integer, and it's going to name it num. So we could have used 5 plus 5. We could use the expression to get that value. We could have called another method to get num2. We could have just inserted a number to get num3. And these line up in order. The ordering maps in a very straightforward fashion. I should have said that earlier. So as it's evaluated from the inside out. So it's a very key thing to understand. We could have just as simply written, or we could have written it. We could have also written it number equals 5 plus 5 int number 2 equals value, and int number 3 equals 30. And we could have written it like this. Number 2, number 3. Once again, nothing new here for you. You'll see there's a lot of different ways to write code, but the essential principle is that we evaluate sequence from top to bottom, but once we hit a statement that has a lot going on in it, or embedded methods within methods, or expressions within methods that are arguments for a parameter, the innermost gets evaluated first, and then it works its way out. It unravels itself. If you'll see here, this produces 20, which is the same output. So I want you to play around with this. If you have to watch this video again, like I said, it's nothing new, but it's just a different way of looking at how you understand things. And I really want you to spend time with this on showing expressions and creating your own methods. Create your own couple of methods in this manner that return ints, or even try creating a method static double and return a double, or return a character. But play around with this idea of evaluating, and also play around with debugging. Set your breakpoints by just left clicking over here in the trough, and then F10, or step your way through the program and see what's being executed and when it's being executed, in what order. It's a lot to digest, but you covered a lot of good material. I'll see you back in the next video.